Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. I'm here with a friend of mine, Michael Connard. He is the CEO of Vizsla Silver. As you are probably aware, if you follow Vizsla, the company put out some more good news this morning. Another set of 19 drill holes from the Napoleon vein corridor. More importantly, perhaps for a lot of us, they did update the average true thickness grade and helpfully provided a specific gravity number for those of us that wanted to multiply the number out, which of course I did in the alert that subscribers got a couple of hours ago. The main thrust of this webinar is really to give you as shareholders, potential shareholders, a chance to ask Mike questions here in real time. Mike's going to start off giving us a presentation, just going to update things, obviously including today's results, and then we'll open things up for you to ask questions. If you look at your dashboard on the right side of your screen, there is a spot there where you can type questions in that I will be able to see, and that's the way to get questions through to me, to Mike. I've got a few already that came in earlier, but I'm certainly happy to get more. We've got time to take a few questions here. Okay, Michael, can you start us off with just a short update presentation, and then we'll see what questions there are.
Yeah, definitely, and thank you, Eric. It's always a pleasure to sit down with you and do these webinars. Well, it's first of all, it's pretty surprising that it's already September. The year has kind of flown by for us here at Vizsla, and it's been a really exciting time for the company. And one of the interesting things, I kind of often think back to last year and the year before, when it's September, because we've had a lot of significant milestones that happened in September for the company. And it was only 3 years ago that we incorporated Vizsla, did a small 15-cent IPO in September of 18, and then it was actually September of 2019 that we entered into this agreement for the Panuco district here.
Yep.
And the amount that the company has grown since entering into that agreement to basically an option to acquire the district. Now in the last 3 months, we've raised over $74 million for the company. 4 million of that came from insiders. We accelerated the 2 options, so now we own this district 100%. There's no obligations or liabilities on ownership. We own this newly consolidated district 100%, and we're in the process of accelerating the mill. That'll be ours. It's just a matter of time till that's ours at the end of the year. So we're in a position now that company's never been in before. Of course, we're very well financed. We have over $55 million in the bank. We have 10 drill rigs on the property. We continue to make these very high-grade discoveries across the district. But just reflecting on how much we've grown over the last 2 years, 3 years, I think that the best is yet to come for the company. And of course, I'm going to tie that into a disclaimer here, because that was a forward-looking statement, and I'm going to be making more forward-looking statements here, of course, as we move forward. But I truly believe that the best is yet to come for the company, and it's it's been an exciting ride so far. But the news today, the drill holes and the averages that we put out now on Napoleon and Tajitos as well, but we'll just focus on Napoleon today. I believe are the basis of a very significant high-grade, large resource here in Mexico. One that we only ever discovered actually in July of last year. We announced that discovery, and so in less than in essentially a year's time, we've accelerated through a pandemic and difficulties drilling. We've very rapidly drilled and aggressively grown the footprint of this mineralization here at Napoleon. And what we're seeing here is actually top tier in Mexico grades and widths, and an enormous potential to grow this resource area at Napoleon. And now Napoleon and Tajitos will be the source of our initial resource, and we're expecting to put that out in Q1 of 2022. But just to refresh people's memory about what Panuco is, I went into it fairly briefly there in the preamble, but Panuco is a district that Unlike many other companies in the industry, let's say the price of silver goes up, and we're kind of inundated with 100 new silver companies. Often those companies are based on projects that have been in companies before, or people have known about these projects before. But what Panuco is something far different from that, and I think that's the actual value, is that this took a lot of time and effort to bring these two Mexican private families to the agreement to actually consolidate this district. And so what we have is actually like a real new discovery, a project that's been brought out of private hands, and out of the shadows into now an investable company for people that like high grade silver and new discoveries. So we brought this district out of the shadows, let's say, and we've made a high grade discovery at Napoleon, and now we're moving this forward. Now the project sits in a prolific trend of silver projects, 80 kilometers away from First Majestic San Dimas mine. This is a past producing district, one that's been in private hands for many years, but has never seen modern exploration. As I said, we have an active 100,000 meter fully funded drill program underway here with 10 drill rigs. We're targeting early 2022 for that initial resource. And we have this district scale upside that sets us apart from many others as well too. This is a vastly underexplored, very large property package. It's the size of the island of Manhattan. It truly is enormous, and we've only drilled 33 out of 117 identified targets, with many targets to come here as we continue to explore. And again, we have something else that sets us apart again, and that's that accelerated pathway to production. The infrastructure we have on this project is a massive asset to us here. We have permits and operating infrastructure, including roads and power, as well as a 500 ton per day mill. So each ounce that we find, is that much closer to production, of course, and that, of course, brings the value per ounce up when you're analyzing the value of these companies. So it truly is a unique company and project, one that does not have many peers in the business here. Now, speaking to the size of the district here, if you look at I think people can see my cursor, but if you look at the inset map here, we're looking at these four ovals here, these four shapes that indicate the areas of our exploration and where we're working right now. Starting from left to right, we have Napoleon, Cinco Señores, Cordon del Oro, and Animas. Now, the Napoleon corridor is the area that we're mostly focused on right now. Tahito sits in the Cinco Señores corridor, but we're focused on the western portion of the district. You'll see the dark blue here is the resource target areas. These are very small in comparison to the overall size of the district, and so we're focusing on basically less than 5% of the overall vein extent in the areas that we're going to talk about today, leaving the rest of the district, as a huge amount of upside to continue to explore. Now grown our resource area to include 105 holes on the Napoleon corridor. The weighted average of these holes is 482 grams per ton silver equivalent. The breakdown of that is, it says very good values of precious metals, 161 grams per ton silver, over 3 grams gold, close to 0.5% lead, and 1.3% zinc. So small base metal credits, but predominantly precious metals here. We've included some notable intercepts as well in this release, including the best of the bunch here, with just under 6 meters true width of 3.6 kilos silver equivalent. That includes an ounce of gold as well too. So some spectacular additions to our drill hole inventory here. And the net effect essentially is we've grown now the Napoleon vein here, the resource area, quite significantly from what we had announced before. Before, essentially, we had drilled the discovery hole, and then in the following 12 months, we released kind of that average of the holes, the 54 holes in this area here, in the center of the panel of mineralization. Now this has grown to include 100 plus holes here, and 1,000 meters of strike, 370 meters of depth. at average true widths of 3.5 meters and that grade of 482. Now these are grades if you're looking at a GT basis to some of the other more topical or more recent kind of major silver discoveries in Mexico. These compare to very well to those high grade intercepts and core resources of other companies in Mexico. So now this is just a weighted average. This isn't including the cutoff or anything like that. And the grade has actually increased slightly since our last average. And the reason for that is this area to the south here, the mineralization essentially is a curtain or a panel of mineralization. You know, if we're looking directly to the west here, we're looking through the vein to the west, to the right of your screen is north, and to the left is south. Now this area to the south here is continuing to grow, and it's really quite impressive, this area to the south of the original discovery. We've also got we have a number of other areas that we can later add to this resource area, but if you want to kind of orientate yourself here on the Napoleon vein, we're looking at this blue circle here, this oval here on the resource area. To the north, we've drilled Papayo, and to the south, we've drilled Ojo de Agua as well, and we continue to drill on 100 centers down this vein corridor. This is a bit of a zoomed out view here. What's exciting about, so let's maybe just go back to the Napoleon view here of the vein here, and you know what's important here is, you know, with this average here, we've given the investor the ability to calculate contained metal and tonnage and basically everything that you know, that you would need to look at where we're at here in terms of a kind of an initial resource on this view. Of course, we'll have to refine that, and that's, you know, a 43-101 resource, but it has the inputs that one might use for that. So 1 kilometer by 370 by 3.5, and of course we've also added the 2.72 gravity. So that's a kilometer here that we're looking at, and I won't do that calculation, but you know, others have the ability to do it. But what's exciting about Napoleon is that we've actually traced mineralization over 2.5 kilometers here. So it's, what we're looking at here is this Napoleon discovery zone. That was the multicolored, dare I say, psychedelic image that we were looking at before with all those different colors. But we've had success drilling here in Ojo de Agua as well as Papayo. And this drilling here has expanded now mineralization over 2.5 kilometers. But what it's also done is giving us ability to kind of create our initial geologic model of the kind of Napoleon vein corridor here. And this is something that's relatively new to us. We put it out in the last 2 news releases, but the way that we see this corridor forming here is that there's actually a precious metals rich core of the system that's plunging gently to the south here. And that's why we're intercepting higher gold numbers here at surface at Ojo de Agua, and base metals more here at Papayo. As you can see, it's you know, plunging to the south here. So moving forward, we're confident. We have confidence in our model here and the ability to kind of target some more of the higher grade areas, thus growing the contained metal that we put out in that initial resource coming forward in 2022. And another highlight here, I mentioned, you know, those 3 highlights that I mentioned. We accelerated the options. We raised all, you know, significant amount of money to keep us well funded. But the third highlight in the last 3 months, and one that really gets me very excited about the district and the potential that we see here, and we'll have to do a bit of a hat tip to Charles Funk, who's our technical director, but also resident geophysicist. He and his team have undertaken electromagnetic surveys here of the district, and basically how we did that was we ran an EM, fixed loop EM, over the initial discovery, confirming that it picked up the sulfide material that we had drilled into, and then we did some other targeting with the EM across the district, and one of those discoveries that we made, really truly a blind discovery, was this Josephine vein, and we had some spectacular grade here. I believe over 4 kilos over a very small subinterval, you know, less than half a meter. But that was within a broader, wider intercept of higher grade. But then our most recent hole here, hole 170, we had 11.4 meters at Josephine with 1.4 kilos silver equivalent. But in that, we had our second highest sub-interval aside from our discovery hole, so 0.7 of a meter at 20 kilograms of silver equivalent. So spectacular grade here. And this was the discovery due to that EM. Now, if I just zoom back out to the district as a whole, we've got other targets in the Cinco Senores corridor that we found with EM, but looking at our upside here with exploration potential, what we will be doing later in the fall and early winter, we expect to fly the district with airborne EM, and I think that has the potential to accelerate what we've already been doing, which is generative exploration, building our pipeline of exploration targets. But it also allows us to find some of the better areas of the veins because the EM will pick up this sulfide material or massive or semi-massive sulfide material that is unique to this district, something that you really don't see very often in these Mexican silver fields. So we're really quite excited about that. And I think just looking at the Napoleon vein corridor alone and the resource potential as we continue to grow here, at Napoleon, we're a fortunate company in that this discovery and this vein here is one that very few companies and teams get to enjoy the discovery of something like this. But I feel confident that as we continue to explore in the district, we'll find many more Napoleon corridors and many more areas of resources that we can add to a very large and significant global resource. And again, just tying it back to that initial slide here, as we continue to do that, now we've de-risked the project through accelerating the options. We're moving through that initial resource where we drill and expand and drill and expand. While we're successful with building up a large resource base here, our pathway to production sets us apart from others in our peer table. So we're really quite excited about that. I think, as I said at the beginning, I think the best is yet to come for the company. And happy to take questions. And I'm sure I'll have a few questions about spinouts and things like that. So I'm happy to touch on those. So
thank you for that update, Mike. Those of you who are perhaps unfamiliar with the securities regulations surrounding resource companies, until there's a 43101 compliant report published, Mike is not allowed to, the number that he gave you, all the numbers to estimate, he cannot speak its name, shall we say, until that 43101. So he's not going to say 55 million ounces silver equivalent. Someone else will have to multiply those numbers out to get it. I'm pretty happy with that number so far. I'm also happy with the grade and the thickness. 3.5 meters, that's more than adequate for doing modern mechanized mining. And 17 ounces per ton silver equivalent. That's pretty good eating. I mean, that kind of thickness and that kind of grade, you're going to have very good economic numbers when they come around to calculating those. So Vizsla continues to perform extremely well, and I'm really happy with it, and that's the reason why I bought a replacement they've ever done. Now, moving on to questions, we'll just get this one out of the way. I think we both knew this question was going to get asked, and it was. Can you give any insight to the timing of the Vizsla copper spin-out?
Yeah, I expect that we'll have those shares in the hands of shareholders and trading essentially or dividend to shareholders in the month of September. So in the next 3 to 4 weeks, let's say.
Okay. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the company, Vizsla Copper is sort of the two projects in there in BC are the ones that are originally listed with. The market doesn't care about them in the context of Vizsla Silver, so management decided to spin those out into a separate entity on a 1 Vizsla Copper for 3 Vizsla Silver share basis. I don't even know, is there a record date, Mike? I don't even know if there's a record date.
That'll be set in the coming days here. Of
Okay,
course, this is a, you know, we're working with the exchange on these things, and we want to make
yeah,
sure everything's done correctly. So we expect that we'll be able to put a record date out shortly, and have those in the hands of shareholders by the end of the month. Now, of course,
okay,
I should make a caveat that none of this is really entirely in our control. So things are subject to change, but I'm always happy to. I think the timeline of September is one that we can stick to.
okay. And for those of you that haven't owned stock where you've had spinouts, the record date is a date that will define the day that you have to own Vizsla Silver on to get spin out shares. So if you're desperate to own Vizsla Copper, you probably want to own Vizsla Silver in the next few days because the record date will be the cutoff for being able to get that Vizsla Copper dividend. Okay, the next question is one I suspect a lot of people have, and I think it's one that's important to answer, and that's, now that you've completed the option, now that you bought 100%, what's the reason you don't just crank the mill up as soon as possible?
Well, there are good reasons, or I guess cautionary tales of companies that have done that early, and I guess there's a couple ways to explain our strategy, but certainly the strategy is we want to let the resource and mineralization at Napoleon and Tajitos dictate how we go into production, and we won't know that until we have that initial resource. Of course, that's the early step to do that. Now, we also we have a very experienced team and board in mining. Pete Longo, our VP Project Development, has significant underground mining experience. Simon Smirlik, our director, the COO, second in charge there at Osenko Engineering, building Las Chispas, building many mines across the world. So we benefit from great experience when it comes from the mining side and the development side, and we're looking at how we can get into production the fastest possible, but we don't want to sacrifice or risk skipping steps and then falling because of that. So this is something that as we continue, we work on this resource, we put the resource out, we grow the resource. At the same time, in the background, the company can be permitting, can be developing the mill and retrofitting the mill and upgrading everything that needs to be done. But we certainly don't want to rush into cash flow. We're well funded. We also have significant warrants, in the money warrants today, and then some other warrants that'll essentially total, if all exercised, another $100 million in the tail for us. That allows us the ability to do things methodically and right. But I had to say that we are, we have a bit of a record now of moving quickly, right? And like as I said, over the last 2 years, we've gone from a project option with a $43 million payment to 1 or 2 drills on the ground to 10 rigs and 100% owned. So rest assured that we're not resting on our laurels and thinking, well, we've got a mill, let's just wait and see what happens. We're pushing this forward very rapidly, but of course it needs to be done in the correct manner, and that's how we're doing it.
Okay, I mean, I'll add a couple of notes for Mike's benefit. I mean, one is that I'm assuming that the vendors, and take note that the vendors took half their payment in stock, so they're, in a very literal sense, they're on side and on board. But I'm assuming those guys weren't making gazillions of dollars mining, because they wouldn't have sold the project if they were. So I'm assuming there might be a couple of issues. It's probably, it's an old mill. It's probably not a perfect mill. You don't know what the right scale is. And the other thing that's worth keeping in mind, if you're not familiar with the mining process, based on what's been drilled so far, and frankly, based on simplicity of permitting, I assume most, if not all, of this is going to be underground. When you're underground mining, even if Mike, basically pulled the proverbial starter's pistol tomorrow, look to take Napoleon as an example. You take a look at that long section, you're going to be ramping in to get through that slightly less deep, high grade section, then probably ramping back to get to the deeper one. And you don't even know how deep you have to go or what the best place to start a ramp is. But even if you started it tomorrow, it takes several months to get in those ramps and then to get levels built in and to build in drill stations and production phases. You need to have a whole bunch of production phases ready to go when you flip the switch. I mean, there's a couple of recent examples. I won't name them, but there's a couple of recent examples where guys didn't have enough stopes ready when they started production, and that turned into a disaster. These guys are not going to be reproducing those disasters. So even if they started tomorrow, it would still take several months. That's just how long it takes to get underground development done.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of anything worth doing is worth doing, right? And we certainly, we're lucky to have project to discovery like this, the high grade nature of this, it's not going anywhere, but we we don't want to cause any issues by rushing into production too.
And do you have any sense of when you'll know? I mean, let's say by the time you get the first, and it will only be the first resource estimate out in Q1, do you think you'll have enough data in hand then to say to yourself, okay, let's upgrade this mill, let's enlarge this mill, let's bulldoze this mill and build a new one? How long do you think it's going to take before you kind of have a handle on that?
Well, I guess what I would say is that even a year ago, even as soon as we got to this district and had the ability to do this, we were looking at what those costs are, what those inputs are, what's a permitting timeline, what do we need to do. So we have a very good idea of what needs to be done. And from the point of that resource, theoretically, we could be in a situation that later in that year or early the following year that something kind of underway there. But I really hesitate to give much guidance on the timing there because of course we don't know what the EM survey is going to turn up. We don't know what what more there is to come and in terms of exploration upside. And so we feel that the first years of mine life logically would come from Napoleon and Tajitos. But and that El Coco mill is there, and it's in the direct area of the Napoleon and Tajitos. But we will know better through studies that what we're kind of taking the early stages of right now. But we will work through proper studies and understand the trade-offs of different areas and different paths forward.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, and I'm gonna kind of tie them together because they sort of do go together in a sense. The first one is just like where are the 10 drill rigs now, but also given the recent results that you put out from Josephine that were so good, does that alter the drill plan any, or is there any chance you think that you would get enough pierce point density into Josephine to be able to pull some of that into the first resource, or do you think it's worth doing that? Have you guys decided yet?
I think that's something that I guess the best way to put it is that we absolutely are drilling that Napoleon corridor, and part of that is at Josephine as well. That Josephine's become it's 50 meters away. It's part of that that resource drilling area. Whether or not that'll be included in the first resource, that's something that I also don't want to can't guarantee that right now. But we are doing resource style drilling in that area that includes Josephine as well. So right now we have 5 rigs on Napoleon, 3 on Tajitos or the Cinco Señores area, and then the balance, the other 2 are just in the Animus, which we're drilling some very interesting workings there at Animus. For those of your audience that have followed us since we started here, Animus was that area that we first started on, and we had some really interesting technical success. Now we've been able to follow that up with one of our rigs, and then the other area that we're drilling, of course, is Cordon de Loro, where we made a high-grade discovery at Cordon de Oro is the corridor, and Cinco Señores, or sorry, the Los Generales is the target there. Now I know that there's a lot of Spanish names there, and it's always tough to kind of keep them straight. But the best way to frame this is that we have the 8 rigs in the western portion of the district, and the western portion of the district is really all about resource drilling. And the other 2 in the central is about resource drilling at potentially kind of early stage potential resource drilling at Cordon de Oro, but more discovery drilling at Animas.
Okay, you kind of, I mean, the release you put out this morning, you kind of foreshadowed that, a month ago when you did that large update, and it sounded like there would probably be something similar coming for Tajitos. Is that something on the horizon?
We'll be working towards that as well. Napoleon and Tajitos, I think, working and kind of lockstep in the sense that we're progressing them at the same time. Expect them both to be in the resource.
Okay. Have you done any metallurgical work yet, or the plant? I mean, I realize you've got in a sense, you've got a metallurgical pilot plant called the cocoa mill that they've been running 500 tons through. So you probably got some. I don't know whether those guys were optimizing it, but you got some idea, obviously.
That work and all those those early kind of baseline project development studies we're undertaking, and I suspect that we'll have some news on that kind of as we continue on into the year. Our goal, certainly for us, as a part of our business plan, is to de-risk and understand as much about the project as possible. And metallurgy is a large part of that. And you're right. We've been fairly comfortable seeing that the recoveries at the El Coco mill have been quite strong for a Mexican mill. We felt pretty comfortable about that, and we've done looked at some studies around that. But we the work around project development, i.e. met tests, is being undertaken.
Okay. I got a question from a viewer that wants to know if there's any M&A in the near future.
Well, we really, like I've said before, this is one of these projects that very rare to come across in this business, and it's not lost on myself or Craig or Simon or the rest of the team that this is something that we owe it to our shareholders and to ourselves to build and see what the extent of the first of all the resource can be, and then also what the production profile can be on this project, and then how profitable it can be, because we're convinced it's going to be very, very profitable as we continue on. Of course, that's speculative and forward-looking statement I've just made there, but we're not in the business of putting this together just to sell it shortly after. We take the view that these are long-term assets for us and our investors, and we want to build and put this into production.
Okay, that's a good answer. Obviously the board doesn't really have any control over what a third party does, but I'm sure, given the way things are going so far, that I don't think the board of directors at Vizsla has any interest in getting chased around just yet. There's still too much value accretion to go on.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even put out our first resource yet, so there's clear milestones ahead of us that I think, looking at what we showed today in the Napoleon resource and then the Tajitos, I see that underpinning significant growth in valuation just based on those numbers alone. So that's our focus, certainly.
And is there can you comment on, because it does come up, people ask, I mean, I don't know of any issues you guys have had, but people do ask when they see the state that you're in. There are people who get a little nervous about that. I mean, have you guys had any issues with security or anything like that? Everything's been okay?
It's funny, I love working in Sinaloa. It suffers from a bad marketing problem. You open up Netflix or whatever, and there's always some sort of show going on there. But in reality, and that's a lot of times in this business, the difference between reality and perception is what creates opportunities. And certainly for us, that's what we found here. This project, I believe, it was only San Dimas, of course, is 80 kilometers away to the north, and on this Durango-Sinaloa border. It's a very similar deposit type to this, and of course, San Dimas has been, because it was in Durango, it's been in production for 100 years. The Getty family had it at some point, and I suspect that if Panuco was over the border in Durango, that it would already be in a large company. That perception is what created the opportunity for us to actually go in and get the project and not have to compete with large players. But that was several years ago, and the reality is Sinaloa over time has improved. We are in an area of Sinaloa that's 45 minutes from the Mazatlan airport, an hour from Mazatlan. The beach community, it's a beautiful 1 million person city, lots of Canadians and Americans, normal times at least, coming through on cruise ships, although I just saw that the cruise ship is returning to Mazatlan. So we have a couple of things. First of all, Sinaloa, we're comfortable in the state. Other companies are working there and showing that it's a great place to work. But even locally, outside of just the state itself, but local to our region, where we're 2 highways crisscrossing the property, major toll, paved highway between Mazatlan and Durango City. Tourists coming to the towns around there. It's a really, it's an incredible place to work, and we've actually really enjoyed this period of working in Copala and Panuco and Concordia and the towns that we work in. So we're quite happy with Sinaloa.
Okay. I mean, I know you guys have your hands full. Do you think you can? Do you think you could realistically handle more than 10 rigs, or is that pretty much as you get capacity for?
Well, our team's very capable of that, I would say, of more, but I think 10 is a pretty good number. It might be on the upper limit of what we, the data flow that we really want to be handling. But there is quite possibly the reality that we may add rigs in the future, but it's not something we're necessarily on the horizon right now.
Okay, and I know that you have field crews, several of them, you have had for months, that are basically ground proofing the 100-odd showings and historic vans that you know about. I assume that work is continuing. Do you foresee anything is there anything popping up? I know you're going to be doing this big EM airborne once things dry out. It's kind of wet season there now. EM doesn't work that well. It works too well when it's wet. You end up generating conductors all over the place that aren't really conductors, so you wait for it to dry out. But do you foresee anything? Is there anything popping up from that surface work that you think is going to be another near-term target?
Yeah, but I can't talk about it.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I'm just kidding. But no, we do have a pretty steady pipeline of opportunities that have been uncovered by that work, the mapping and sampling work. Right. It's in our matrix, moving from left to right, from discovery to over to resource drilling. Not every target obviously makes it, because we're looking for the right balance between kind of volume and grade. We could essentially find grade all over the district, but it's it's important to find opportunities that offer that pathway to kind of large mineralization like a Napoleon. But I can say that we don't want to, we won't announce them until they're progress further from the prospect that they're in right now. But we have some very, very exciting targets throughout the district that of course, for us, it's going to be important to show, first of all, the resource at Napoleon, but then also the pathway to more resources at other Napoleon-like veins. And we do have a pipeline of things that I could see that happening from, or I could see those opportunities turning into significant areas for us. So we do have those opportunities, and you know, as we continue in the district, we'll update the shareholders about them.
Okay. I mean, I think that covers all the questions that I've gotten. You know, Vizsla has done a great job so far. Good share structure, 55 million in the bank, 10 rigs going. You know, it's going to have news flow all the time for months and months and months. I mean, honestly, it does remind me very much of the earlier days of Silvercrest, which was a company I followed from inception. It does bear a lot of similarities to that. It's got a couple of It has a couple of market advantages, one of which Silvercrest had early as well, but another one that it didn't. In the case of Panuco, this is a fully permitted mine site. That's a pretty big deal when it comes to timeline. Even if these guys decide the right way to go 6 months from now is to tear Coco down and build a new one, it's still going to take years off of the timeline in terms of getting it into production. And the other thing that Vizsla has going for it, because of the market success it's had, aside from obviously having 55 million, it's got a market cap, which I personally expect is going to get larger, that gives it quite a bit of leverage when it comes to financing production. And I don't expect Panuco is going to be a huge price tag because of how much development there is. And as Mike noted earlier, if all of the in-the-money warrants got exercised, it did another $100 million. I wouldn't underestimate how much of an advantage that leverage is. It's something I noted for years with Silvercrest. For years, I would have people ask me about, yeah, but how are they going to finance production? How are they going to finance production? And at the time, I was like, when you've got a $700 or $800 million market cap, you don't have a problem financing production. The guys that want to do finance deals have essentially zero leverage with you. And I think that Vizsla is quickly getting the same position. And I would not underestimate how big an advantage that is. It's a very big advantage for a development level story. And that's largely a credit to the work that these guys have done. So good job, Mike. Good job, Craig. Good job, everybody else. I mean, I think that covers it. I haven't had any new questions come in, so I think we can probably end it here. And just want to thank everybody for coming by. I'm assuming there will be a replay up, so those who didn't get a chance to see it live can watch it later. But that's all I've got for today. Vizsla Silver, VZLA on the venture, and VIZSF on the QB, I think it is.
Yeah.
That's it for today. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.